hounds, chase ghosts, come sleep, watch out, demons are coming, run, sleep, hide, spirits, ghosts, hide, demons, hounds, ghosts, demons are coming.
Merry Christmas, my little hellhounds. Tonight we have 4 very festive stories to get our Christmassy teeth into. And as of recording, I have reached the first 100 subs mark. Thank you so much, everyone. I have loved every minute of this journey. Remember that if you like the video, then please don't forget to click that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Remember to click that bell icon so you know every time I upload. Now, tell me, my little hellhounds, what Christmas drink have you got? Leave a comment down below. I just have a Christmas ale. Now, let's get right into it. The Christmas Tree, posted by MTP6921. I became one of those parents you feel bad for on Facebook or back in 2005 MySpace. Our 7-year-old daughter Grace, who seemed to be the next soccer star, had a penny-sized bruise on her right leg from falling down while playing soccer. My wife Gina and I brushed it off as nothing. But as the days went by, the size of the bruise had expanded to nearly her whole leg. Then Gina and I knew there was something wrong. We took Grace to the nearby Lehigh Valley Hospital in Pennsylvania. We were thinking Grace had some type of clotting disorder, like hemophilia, but it was actually something that could be viewed as being much worse. After going through a barrage of tests, Grace was diagnosed with an aggressive form of childhood leukemia. After hearing the news, all the trivial things that ever bothered me, like my job, ended that day. The doctor really didn't sugarcoat it and basically told us that Grace's chances for survival were slim to none. We had the choice of treating the cancer aggressively or allowing only palliative care where Grace would knowingly die in weeks, but without the harmful effects of chemotherapy and radiation. We decided to treat the cancer with aggressive chemotherapy infusions and radiation. It didn't take long for Grace's hair to fall out, and she remained bedbound at the hospital. Gina stayed with her for most of the days, and I would go visit Grace in hospital after work. The one Tuesday in mid-December 2005, I was just so heartbroken how weak and how much pain Grace was in that I decided that I needed to take a break and go to the local mall. The doctor's prognosis on Grace's survival had become really poor, to the point where they wanted to stop the chemo infusions. I cried the whole way driving to the mall. I questioned why I was alive and what was the purpose of anything. I figured that I would go to the fledglings Strawbridge's department store that my parents used to take me when I was a kid. I walked around the store in despair, and I always had moments of anger. Nowhere in our plans was for our daughter to die at 7 years old. We thought about Grace going to college and whether or not we would allow her to date in high school. But who thinks about their 7-year-old daughter's funeral? As I walked down the aisles, it looked like the department store was close to going out of business because of the lack of merchandise. Down one of the clearance return aisles, I saw what looked like a poorly repacked artificial tree that a customer had returned. I had a thought that maybe I would get a fake tree for Grace. The doctor had talked about allowing Grace to die at home on hospice care. From the cost of the chemo and radiation treatments, and from Gina being out of work, we had taken out so many loans that actually having $5 in my pocket was surprising. I bought the poorly wrapped tree looking thing up to the register. The cashier looked at it and said, "What, is this a lawn ornament or something?" She looked around at the poorly returned package for a barcode or for some type of numbers to put into the cash register. She kind of giggled and said, "I don't even think this thing originated from our store. Where did you get this?" I pointed towards the aisle where I got it from and I said, "Over there." The cashier said, "Yeah, that makes sense. We are trying to get everything out of our stockroom that has been sitting around for years." She giggled and then said, "This looks like it's been sitting around for many years, or a customer just dumped it off on the shelf. Well, I don't know how much to charge you." I said, "How about $5? She giggled again and said, "That's fine." I loaded the package in the car and went home. I wanted some form of normalcy, so I decided to set up the tree versus going back to the hospital. Gina and I talked about possibly getting a real Douglas fir tree or something, but we didn't want the germs around us that the hospital warned us about from things like plants that would get Grace sick, and with her weakened immune system. I took the thing out of the poorly wrapped package and said, "Geez, this thing is in poor shape. How old is this thing?" The tree kind of reminded me of one of the Charlie Brown's episodes in just how bare it looked. The tree came with lights. As I looked at the lights, I said, "This has to be one of the first artificial trees ever made." The cord looked like it was made before the 1940s. The tree stood a little over 4 feet. It came with a tree topper that I was reluctant to put on top of the tree because it just looked creepy. I don't know if it was supposed to be some type of fallen angel or some type of pagan deity. The pathetic looking tree was complete, and I said out loud, "Well, you get what you pay for." I was reluctant to plug in the lights. I didn't know if the lights would explode or if they would cause the electrical outlet to explode from poor wiring. I decided to close my eyes and plug it in anyways. The plug to the tree was wrapped in some type of paper mesh that wouldn't have passed fire codes in the 1950s. I thrusted the cord into the outlet and was thankful that I wasn't shocked. The white lights barely came on. They looked like a flashlight that was going to lose power at any moment. I took a step back and thought, well, that's it. I then said to myself, we don't have any presents or anything else to put under the tree. I looked around the house and I really didn't see anything, so I mockingly took off my wedding band and placed it underneath the tree. As I did that, the tree actually got a little brighter. I stood there puzzled, thinking, what the heck just happened? I looked for something else to put under the tree. Grace had an unopened toy from her birthday that she didn't want, so I put it under the tree and nothing happened. The lights didn't get any brighter. I then went upstairs to my wife's jewellery box and got the diamond ring that her grandmother had given her, which she was reluctant to sell for money. I put the ring under the tree and once again the tree lights got a little brighter. I sat down on the couch next to the tree and I was just perplexed. A few moments later the phone rang and Gina sounded really happy and surprised. Gina told me that for the first time in weeks, Grace had enough energy to talk in complete sentences. We said goodbye to each other and I rubbed my hands back and forth through my hair. I thought to myself that before I left the hospital this morning, Grace looked lifeless and I was actually expecting to hear horrible news from Gina. So I got in my car and rushed down to the hospital. There was my daughter with her eyes open and actually answering questions. Though she was still weak, I felt an overwhelming amount of joy. This was the first time in weeks that Grace had actually shown any signs of improvement. It just didn't make any sense. I saw her with my own 2 eyes this morning. I sat down on the chair next to my daughter's bed. My wife then looked at my left hand and said, "What happened to your ring? You didn't sell it, did you?" I paused for a moment, then I thought to myself, what a coincidence with placing my ring and Gina's grandmother's ring under the tree and the tree responding with its lights getting brighter. I then thought, did this have anything to do with Grace getting better? I looked at Gina's left hand and said, "Let me borrow your ring." Gina said, "Why?" I said, "Don't worry about it. I'll tell you later." Gina reluctantly took off her ring and handed it to me. I said goodbye to Grace and Gina and told them I was going to do something at home for a little bit. I got home and put Gina's ring under the tree, and instantaneously the tree got a little brighter. Within a few moments, Gina called again and said, "You're never going to believe this." Grace asked. "For food. She's actually hungry. The nurse gave her a cracker and she's actually eaten it." I was at a loss for words. I took a step back and looked at this tree. I didn't even know if it was a Christmas tree or something else. I didn't tell anyone regarding the possible healing powers of the tree. Not even Gina. I went to my parents' house and I asked them if I could borrow whatever jewellery they had. My parents felt so bad for me with everything that was going on with Grace that they didn't even question my motives. They just gave me whatever jewellery they had. I went home with the jewellery my parents gave me and I put the jewellery under the tree. I waited a few moments and Gina had called back again. This time she was just so hysterical with excitement. She said, "Grace just said she wants to go for a walk. Can you believe this? She actually wants to get up and walk." I replied, "I'll be right there." Then I hung up the phone. I rushed over to the hospital, and when I walked into the nursing unit, it looked like there was just about every doctor in the country there outside my daughter's room. As I got closer, I could hear one of the doctors say, "That little girl was discussed in this morning's meeting and she was expected to die at any time." I rushed past all the doctors and there was my daughter sitting up in bed. Even though she had no hair, she looked completely healthy. I gave her the biggest hug and Gina and I were crying with delight. A few days went by and all of the tests the doctors ran came back showing that the cancer had disappeared. The leading cancer doctor in the state of Pennsylvania had come to look over all of Grace's tests from the beginning. He was completely stunned that not only did the cancer disappear when the chemo and radiation was stopped, but there was no harm that was done to any of Grace's tissues or organs. He said there was actually no way this was possible, but science was always emerging, and this was the very first of its kind. Within a couple of days, Grace was actually coming home for Christmas as a normal, healthy girl and not to die. Gina has not seen the tree yet. She just didn't want to miss a moment with Grace in hospital. 2 days before Christmas, Grace actually came home. She was able to walk through the front door on her own. As Grace and Gina got into the living room, they both kind of just looked at the tree. The two of them looked at it almost like a piece of art that they didn't understand what it was. It was just such a blessing to watch Grace walk through the house. I had nearly given up all hope. Grace said that she wanted to go to Toys R Us to pick out Christmas presents, so we left the house so she could pick out what she wanted. Someone had donated $300 for Grace for Christmas gifts. After Grace went through the store to pick out what she wanted, I then told Gina to take Grace to a different store so I could purchase the toys. I hid the toys in the trunk of the car and then we drove home. Eventually Grace went to sleep and Gina and I wrapped the presents. I stepped out of the living room where Gina was wrapping presents to go into the kitchen to get a glass of water. As I proceeded back to the living room, I heard the most horrible sound a father can hear. It was a loud shrieking sound that came from Grace's room upstairs. It was her lungs had collapsed and she was gasping for air. The tree lights got dim. I quickly looked at Gina's left hand and saw her wedding ring. Then I looked under the tree and saw the ring was missing. I grabbed Gina's left arm and forcibly took the ring from her off her finger. I then put the ring back under the tree, which instantaneously got brighter again, and at the same time I stopped hearing Grace gasp for air. Gina had a stunned look on her face from me nearly breaking her finger, but we were both more concerned about rushing upstairs to see if Grace was okay. Grace was okay. When we saw her, she was breathing normally. I told her that she just had a bad dream. Gina and I went back downstairs and I told her everything about the tree. She was speechless. She saw with her own eyes of what happened when her ring was taken away from the tree, and when the ring was put back, and how it affected Grace. We decided to kneel in front of the tree to show reverence. We didn't know who we were praying to, either good or evil, but it didn't matter because it was keeping Grace alive. Gina and I would have sold our souls to the devil from day one when we brought Grace to the hospital, if that's what it took to save Grace's life. Christmas morning came and we decided to put Grace's present in the kitchen. We just didn't want to create any bad mojo with the tree. After opening the presents, Gina and I knelt in front of the tree for an hour. A couple of days had went by and Grace started to complain that she felt weak. Gina and I both looked at each other, knowing what needed to be done. We discussed that I would drive to the rich outskirts of Philadelphia, to the town of Villanova, which is one of the richest parts of the United States. I parked my car at the Villanova College to help blend in. Then I walked down one of the residential streets. I saw an older lady walking her dog and noticed she had a large diamond ring on. I walked up behind her and told her to give me her ring and not to turn around. The older lady obliged, and I rushed home with the ring and put it under the tree, which gave Grace her strength back. As the months went by, I realised the more valuable the item I put under the tree, the longer Grace stayed healthy. My father was into fine art, and I was talking to him about different art collectors that he knew. He told me of this guy who owned an original Claude Monet painting in the affluent town of Bryn Mawr. He told me they were from a wealthy Jewish family heritage. I staked out the Bryn Mawr house for a month and noticed a pattern of the family going to the temple on Saturdays. My father had personally seen the painting in the Bryn Mawr's house, so I knew where to go once I got into the house. I waited for the next Saturday and quickly hurled myself over their fence. I knew by breaking their house window I would set off the house alarm, so I acted quickly, and within 5 minutes I was able to get the painting out of the house. I made a mad dash back over the fence and ran to my car, which was about a quarter of a mile away. I went home and put the painting under the tree, which really shined brightly after adding the painting. It's been 2 years now and we haven't taken down the tree. Grace has been really healthy, and every cent that Gina and I make goes to the tree. Forever 40, posted by MTP6921. My wife Gina and I never have any time for anything. My wife is an event planner for baptisms, weddings, bar mitzvahs at a local golf club, which has to be one of the most stressful jobs in the country. People are just so demanding and critical. Everything has to be right. As the manager of a Philadelphian hotel, I am equally as busy as my wife, Gina, and it seems getting through a day is almost a miracle at times. Every time the house gets cleaned, it seems by the next day it's just a big mess again. With our Civil War era built house, repairs are always inevitable, and it's so hard to get away from being behind the 8 ball. It seemed like Gina and I never have time to spend together, and once again Christmas time is close again. The one thing Gina and I looked forward to was going to the local Christmas tree farm to cut down our own Christmas tree. The same nice man, Gus, is there every year, and he hasn't raised his prices in all the years we have been going. We continued our Black Friday tradition by seeing Gus as we had done so the previous years. He's such a nice man, and based on only charging $10 a tree, he definitely isn't doing it for the money. We borrowed one of his saws, and after careful deliberation we cut down the right tree. We drove home and put the tree up and decorated the tree with the same ornaments we had for years. It seemed like Christmas time had flew by once again, and on the day after Christmas we have decided to put in new composite flooring in the living room. I always liked the original wood flooring that was over 100 years old, but there was so much wear and tear and we needed to replace it. I decided that I was going to remove the flooring, so plank by plank I started to remove each piece of wood. The basement has thick original log beams that are about as thick and round as a railroad tie. As I continued to remove the wood planks, I came across an old 35mm projector with rolls of film. Though I wanted to get the job done of removing the old flooring, I was just so curious to know what was on the film reels. I plugged the old projector in the dining room and closed the window shades. The process of setting up the film was a real pain, but I finally got the machine to work. As the machine ran, I was left speechless in what I was watching. It was the two of us, Gina and I. We were just sitting by the Christmas tree. The quality of the film looked to be from around the late 1960s to early 1970s. I couldn't stop thinking about who took these videos, and how did they get the film to look so old? As I continued to watch the film, it dawned on me that Gina and I were always just so busy trying to keep our heads above water that I didn't pay any attention to the years that had gone past. I tried to think how old I was, and that I had stopped counting once I hit 40. Then I tried to think about Gina's age, and the same was true, where I couldn't come up with a number. Gina had a heartbreaking stillbirth, and we decided to try again and forego having children. As long as we were busy, the two of us didn't think about the stillbirth or the fact we didn't have kids. Gina was upstairs rearranging her closet, and I yelled for her to come watch the film. She had the same impression that I had, and then we both had that aha moment. The both of us have been so occupied at keeping our heads above water over the years that we didn't realise that we haven't gotten older. We both looked at each other, and I said, "We're both 40 something, right?" Gina looked at me and said, "Yeah, but 40 what?" We were both only children whose parents were deceased. Both our jobs were notorious for having constant turnaround, so both of us couldn't say we worked with someone for 10 years. The both of us were just completely befuddled. I knew about every 5 years we would get new used cars and generally the latest technology regarding our phones, but we just hadn't put two and two together, that we were kind of stuck at whatever age that we are now. I asked Gina, "What year were you born?" She paused and said, I don't know. Then she asked me, "What year were you born?" I responded the same. I just don't know. I remember playing outside as a kid, but anything beyond that was foggy. I'd been working in the historic Bellevue Stratford Hotel for so long that that's all I could really remember. Gina basically said the same thing with working in the Philadelphia Golf Club. We both talked to each other and came to the conclusion that we had just purposely kept ourselves busy, so we wouldn't think about not having kids, not having family, and not getting older. We really didn't have any friends, and any conversations we had at work were just work related. Both of our jobs had multiple new owners over the years. We kind of just went along with the flow. If I hadn't come across this old 35mm film projector, then Gina and I would never have had this discussion, which led to a discussion on how we never discuss anything. The two of us just roll with the times. We never travel. We only take off for Christmas, and our money just goes into a bank account. This was the first time in maybe decades that we actually had stopped to talk to each other. I said, "What year is it?" Gina replied, "I don't know, 2000 and something." I responded, "What did we do for 1999? Gina responded, "You know, we both worked." Then I said, "What about 1989, or 1979, or 1969, or even 1959? We both looked at each other, puzzled. I answered my own question with, "We just both worked." I then said, "What year did you have the stillbirth?" Gina broke down hysterically crying. It was like I brought up something that should never be brought up. I tried to think to myself and realised that the stillbirth was so traumatic that I kind of blocked it out, where it was just a foggy memory. Then I looked at the old flooring and had a jolt of something that went through my brain. I remembered laying down the same flooring well over 100 years ago. I said to Gina, "How can this be? We have lived through everything from not having electricity to having electricity to driving horses and then cars, and it just happened." Gina said, "Yeah, everything just happened." I was always in the age gap where I was at first too young to fight in the war. Then I hit that cut-off 40-something where I was just too old. We had seen house after house being built in our Bucks County community that we just never questioned anything. Much like our rectangular-shaped house, we just existed. Nobody stops to look at a pebble and says, "Wow, I've seen that pebble every day for years," because it's just there, much like Gina and I. As the film ended, Gina asked me, "So, what does this mean now?" I replied, "I don't know." I put the old projector back where I found it, and I decided to put the old flooring back. Without having kids, Gina and I never bothered to take pictures of each other. Our parents died so long ago that pictures weren't readily available. The thought of the stillbirth put both of us back in the trance-like states where we just went back to work the next day, and we kind of knew what we had to do in order to not think about our lifeless baby. So much so that the year had come and went, and we were ready to get another tree for Christmas. We drove into Gus's tree farm and Gus greeted us. I couldn't stop thinking about the year before when I discovered the 35mm film, and Gina and I discovered that we couldn't think how old we were. I greeted Gus by saying, "Hey Gus, how did the year go for you?" Gus replied, "You know, busy as usual." I remembered Gus's wife, who used to work with him and then unfortunately passed away some time ago. The only time I see Gus is during Christmas time when we get the tree. Much like the pebble, most people don't pay attention to Gus, and most people just get their tree in whatever temporary parking lot tree stand that props up. I then said, "Hey Gus, how many years have Gina and I been coming here?" Gus stopped and he said, "You know, I'm really not sure." I then said, "Do you think it was 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years?" Gus kind of looked at me and said, "You know, it's just something that I just don't think about." I then said, "Well, how many years have you been tending to the Christmas trees and selling them?" He looked at me and said, "Geez, I really don't know. I'm not sure what year it really is right now." He looked at me and said, "Geez, I really don't know. I'm not sure what year it is really right now." I then said, "I remember your wife when she used to work with you." Then Gus kind of blanked out for at least 30 seconds. It seemed like he did everything possible to not think about his wife who died. Gus gradually regained his attention and seemed to have a thought and said, "Yeah, I remember. My wife died about the same year your wife was pregnant." The Squirene's Daughter and the Devil, posted by BlackCat1206. The Squirene's Daughter and the Devil's Dance. There was once a wealthy but kind squire in Gaelic who lived in a huge castle or mansion along with his 3 beautiful daughters, Faida, Kira and Naim. Their beloved mother had passed away 5 years back. It was a dark, cold, stormy Christmas Eve night when the devil paid Squirene Roche a visit. The Squirene invited the devil to dine with them, and the devil did. The Squirene invited the devil to play cards with them, and the devil did. The devil being the devil and a crafty, conniving and wretched creature, made a wager with the old Squirene. Now, the devil had taken quite a shine to Squirene Roche's youngest daughter and wanted her for himself. The devil told the Squirene he would play cards with him, but if he won 3 rounds, then the radiant fair Naim would be his forever, and he would dance her back to hell to live as his bride for all eternity. The Squirene felt obliged to agree. I mean, who turns down the devil? The devil being the devil cheated at cards, and so thought he had tricked himself into getting a beautiful young innocent bride to corrupt. The devil underestimated Naim though, for Naim means bright in Gaelic, and Naim certainly lived up to her name. She did not want to be the devil's wife, and so along with her 2 sisters hatched a most devious plan that would put the devil himself to shame. They filled up a beautiful red silk bag with salt, and Naim hung it around her slender neck. When the devil came to claim Naim, they began to dance. But we all know that demons cannot tolerate salt at any cost. It is like poison to them, and the devil is the king of demons. On noticing the beautiful bag, the devil's curiosity and greed got the better of him, and he tore it off the fair clever maiden's neck. Ripping the bag open, he gazed upon the pure white salt, and with an awful part wail, part growl, he fled the old Squirene's castle or mansion, and scurried all the way back to hell, leaving the family to enjoy the festivities of the season in peace and tranquility, as they deserved. This lovely folk tale was told regularly to my cousins and I as kids by our beautiful Irish gran, and it always made me laugh and gave me shivers in equal measures. How an Elf on the Shelf Changed My Life, posted by MTP6921. As a kid, I remember going to my grandparents' house and seeing souvenir plates of places they had visited, like the Niagara Falls, displayed in their house. As an adult with my own family, I wanted to continue the same tradition of having actual physical mementos versus just having digital memories. So when I took my wife Gina and my daughter Grace across Europe, we tried to get something from each country we went to. We adopted our daughter Grace from Romania when she was 5 and she's 12 now. So when we visited Romania, I wanted to pick out a good keepsake. Grace has little to no memories of being a young child in Romania. Both of her parents died, and instead of being put into an orphanage, Gina and I were able to adopt her. Grace is an introvert and doesn't prefer to be around people most of the time, but other than that, she's a typical young teenage girl. The European tour company we were with took us to an outdoor market in Romania, where there were gypsies mixed in with local farmers trying to peddle their merchandise. Grace didn't like the market. It was hard to tell with Grace if she was just moody from having too much hormones or because she wanted nothing to do with Romania. I decided not to take too much time, so when I saw a child's doll that looked like an elf on the shelf, I knew that was going to be our memento from Russia. Grace didn't like the concept of having an elf on the shelf when she was a young kid. The doll just scared her. So I wanted to have another go at it because she could think more logically now, and she should be able to see the humour in the small fabric doll at Christmas time. So when Grace wasn't looking, I got the handmade doll for just $1, which was crazy to think you can get anything for $1 nowadays. Being that it's mid-October now, I figured I would put the doll in the attic for now and bring the doll out in early December to hide it around the house. Our trip to Europe was fantastic, and we hoped that it enriched Grace's experience of the world. When we got back to our home state of New York, it seemed like full time had whizzed by, and we spent Thanksgiving with Gina's family. For the 15 years we were married, Gina always felt the effects of the seasonal changes, and she was actually diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder. So I wanted to try my best to lift up Gina's and Grace's mood for Christmas. After putting up our usual Christmas lights, I went to Walmart and bought additional lights to put up over the house. It was a great bonding experience, and the three of us loved the Christmas glow that the lights brought out. I knew there was one last thing that I almost forgot to bring out, which was the doll that I got from Romania that closely resembled the elf on the shelf, and its red pants and green shirt. The first night I wanted to put it somewhere obvious so Grace would see it right away and hopefully get a chuckle out of it. Grace stopped believing in Santa when she was 10, so I reckoned she knew there was nothing magical about the doll, and it was either Gina or I who was going to put the doll in various precarious spots each night. I put the doll on the kitchen counter in plain view for the first night when Grace went to sleep. As I looked at the doll, I said to myself, what a great memento of Romania, especially for $1. But boy, did the thing look creepy. They must have used old fabric because the doll looked like it was from the Middle Ages. I thought the doll had character and wasn't a typical mass-produced elf on the shelf that was made in China that everyone else had. As a plumber, I'd been working day and night recently, so I figured Grace would find the doll before I woke up because of my need to sleep in. I must have slept 8 hours straight. As I started to wake up, I heard the most awful sound a father could hear. Grace was yelling and screaming like somebody had just cut her arm off. My adrenaline kicked in and I made a mad dash down the stairs towards Grace. When I saw Grace in the kitchen, she was paralysed in fear, pointing at the doll. Grace said, "Daddy, I see that thing when I wake up in the middle of the night on my dresser, or sometimes at the end of my bed." I responded, "Gracie, that doll has been in the attic for weeks. You know that you and your mother don't like to go into the attic. And I know I didn't go into the attic, so nobody has touched the doll. And you must have been having nightmares." Grace said, "Dad, I know. I thought I was just having nightmares too, especially when the doll would disappear and be gone the next morning. But trust me, Dad, that is the same doll that has been in my room." Gina, who's standing right next to me, said, "The attic is just as creepy as that doll. Gracie, honey, why didn't you tell us you were having nightmares?" Grace responded, "I didn't want you guys to think I was a baby," as she continued to cry in a low whimper. I said, "I'm so sorry, Gracie. This was supposed to be just a stupid, funny thing." Then I took the doll and threw it in the garbage. Then I said, "You see, now it's gone. Do you feel okay to go to school today?" And Grace shook her head, yes. I even took the garbage out of the house and was able to get it there before the garbage man came. I felt so bad. Hearing Grace yell was the worst sound I ever heard. Grace went to school, I went to work, and Gina was working from home. When I got home from work, I greeted Grace and I said, "Is everything okay, honey?" Grace responded, "Yeah, Dad, I feel better now." We had dinner and then we went to bed. I woke up and saw the sun had come out. Usually Grace wakes me up when I hear her running down the stairs, but I didn't hear it this morning. I went into her room and Grace was as white as a ghost and she was hyperventilating. I said, "Oh my God, what's the matter, Grace?" Grace responded in a very low, raspy voice, "It came back last night." I said, "Honey, you saw the garbage men come and take it away, right?" Grace was paralysed in fear to respond. I knew something really wrong was going on inside Grace's head. Both Gina and I waited a bit to see if she would eat or do anything else, but she just laid in the bed, almost in a catatonic state. Gina and I thought it would be best to take her to the children's hospital to be evaluated. I carried Grace to the car with tears running down my face. I explained the situation to the psychiatrist at the children's hospital. The psychiatrist was unable to get Grace to say a word or even make a movement. The psychiatrist picked Grace's arm up and the arm just flopped back down. The psychiatric doctor took Gina and I into the family meeting room and he said to us, the doll probably triggered negative repressed memories when Grace was a young girl in Romania. This type of doll is typical in the Romanian gypsy culture. The nightmares she's having were probably from the doll that she had as a young girl. I said to the doctor, is Grace going to be okay? Can she come home? The doctor responded, right now she can't come home. If she doesn't eat by tomorrow, one of the surgeons here will have to insert a feeding tube into her. Gina started crying when she heard the news. Gina and I stayed all day at the hospital and we agreed that one of us would stay overnight with Grace. The days went by and any little progress Grace would make, she would then revert back to her catatonic state the next day. I could barely function at home or at work. I knew I was the one who brought back the doll home from Romania. I thought to myself that Grace probably saw the doll hidden in the suitcase when we were in Europe, which brought back whatever horrible memories. Then stupid me puts it out on the kitchen counter. I had to take time off from work. I was just too depressed to function. I was doing stupid things like misplacing my cell phone and forgetting to turn the stove off. This day was particularly bad because I searched the whole house and I just couldn't find my cell phone. I knew that if I didn't call my job today, they weren't going to allow me to ever come back. I figured that I must have left the phone at the hospital when I left last night and Gina stayed with Grace. As I drove into the hospital's parking lot, I remembered that Gina and I took a short ride to Walmart yesterday to buy Grace a Christmas gift. That's when it dawned on me that my phone probably fell out of my pocket in Gina's car. Fortunately, I had a spare key to Gina's car in my car. When I got to Gina's car, I opened the car door and I didn't see my phone on the seat, so I reached under the passenger seat and there was nothing. So for the heck of it, I reached under the driver's seat and felt something small and soft. I pulled the unknown object out and I completely froze. I just couldn't believe what I was holding in my hands. It was that goddamn doll. It almost looked identical, but I knew it wasn't the same exact doll. Gina must have bought another one online. I said to myself, that fucking bitch. She has been terrorising Grace for months with that doll that was supposed to be in the attic. I sat motionless in the car for at least half an hour. I cried the whole time I was in the car. I knew now that Gina was a psychopath and our marriage was over. Before confronting Gina, I went to see the psychiatrist first. We both agreed that the best thing to do was put a hidden camera in Grace's hospital room and for me to put the doll back in Gina's car where I found it. Then I went into Grace's room. It took everything I had not to confront Gina. Eventually I asked Gina if she could stay again tonight in the room with Grace, which she agreed. I asked Gina to come have coffee with me so the hospital could install the camera in Grace's room. I really had nothing to say to this monster, but I knew I had to stall Gina for at least 2 hours in the cafeteria. I looked at her as one would look at someone who was trying to kill their daughter. The 2 hours went by, then I went to say goodbye to Grace for the night. I felt heartless leaving Grace with Gina, but this was the only way to catch Gina and hopefully heal Grace. It was a long night. I really didn't sleep at my house. My life had changed so much with Grace getting sick, and now I'm going to have to leave my wife forever, where she'll likely go to prison. The next morning when I got to the hospital, the nurse told me to see the administrator of the hospital. The administrator stated that my hunch was correct, and the hidden cameras revealed Gina had put the doll on the overbed table for Grace to see. Then Gina would quickly remove it if she heard the nurse coming. Also, the administrator told me that the psychiatrist had called the police, who had a detective come in and review Grace's situation. After reviewing everything to include the hidden video recording, the detective arrested Gina on suspicion of child endangerment. The administrator gave me the number to contact the detective. After giving my statement, the district attorney decided to press charges against Gina. Bail was set at $500,000 and I made no attempt to secure the bond. After a week I started to see a noticeable difference in Gina. I could tell she was listening to what I was saying and she wasn't in a total trance anymore. The psychiatrist said that Gina suffered from Munchausen by proxy, and it was the first time that he was aware of a perpetrator using a modality other than chemicals or a physical means to harm their child. Grace and I went home and adapted to our new normal. I had to explain to her that Gina was sick and she was going to spend a good amount of time in prison for intentionally trying to harm Grace. I no longer referred to Gina as your mother when I talked to Grace. Well, that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Remember, if you have any stories, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Don't forget to subscribe, my little hellhounds, and like the video and click that bell icon. Now, good night, my little hellhounds, and Merry Christmas.